Imagine stepping into a cavern. You are perfectly equipped, right? Clad in enchanted armor. You are a seasoned adventurer who is practically invincible.
Yeah, you've survived dragons, demons, entire armies.
Exactly. You've spent months, maybe years, building this character into an unstoppable force. So you take one confident step forward, brush your hand against a slightly off-color stone on the wall, and you are instantly obliterated.
Not wounded.
Right, not knocked unconscious, just obliterated. Your heroic journey is permanently over because you forgot to tap that specific, seemingly random piece of the wall first with a 10-foot pole.
It is honestly the ultimate subversion of fantasy. It's that exact moment where heroism, backstory, and brute strength are just stripped away,
Yeah.
and you are left with nothing but your own paranoid human intuition.
Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are exploring a cultural artifact that fundamentally broke and reshaped the rules of game design. We are talking about the infamous Tomb of Horrors, officially known as Module S1.
Published for Dungeons & Dragons way back in 1978.
Right. And we have this comprehensive historical and design retrospective in front of us, detailing the module's architecture, its history, and, its enduring psychological impact.
Which is massive.
Oh, totally. Our mission for you listening today is to explore how a game engineered solely to murder its players' avatars evolved from a sadistic tournament experiment into a permanent Rorschach test for gaming philosophy.
It really is a fascinating evolution.
Okay, let's unpack this, because this isn't just some quirky gaming history lesson. We are looking at a masterclass in psychological manipulation.
Absolutely.
And you should care about this because it's a perfect case study in how systems can be explicitly engineered to punish hubris and force human beings to completely change how they think and behave under extreme pressure.
Well, to truly understand that manipulation, we need to look at the crime scene itself, the architecture of this dungeon.
Right, the tomb itself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the Tomb of Horrors is set under this desolate, skull-shaped hill in the fictional world of Greyhawk.
Mm-hmm.
And the overarching plot is just radically minimalist.
Like barely even there.
Exactly. There are no sweeping geopolitical stakes. There are no damsels in distress waiting for rescue. There isn't even, like, a ticking clock urging you forward.
It relies entirely on the player's own greed. You are only in there because you want the loot.
Yeah, and the antagonist isn't even actively opposing you. He is a demilich named Acererak.
A demilich.
Right? He was once a powerful wizard who, in his pursuit of immortality, degraded into a single jewel-encrusted skull.
Oh, wow. Just a floating skull.
Pretty much. But he doesn't aggressively guard his wealth. Instead, he deliberately seeds rumors of his resting place across the world. He fills the tomb with untold riches to act as a metaphysical honey trap.
A honey trap for adventurers.
Exactly. He lures the world's most arrogant heroes into his lair strictly to harvest their souls to sustain his own existence.
What really stands out to me in these sources is that you barely even see an Acererak. He is not patrolling the halls.
No, not at all.
He's not delivering evil monologues. The dungeon itself is the villain. There are barely any traditional monsters to fight. You might run into a mutated four-armed gargoyle or like a shadow demon, but mostly you are just battling the architecture.
It really is.
It feels less like a traditional fantasy adventure and more like an escape room built by a sociopath.
The sociopathic element you're picking up on is a design philosophy of pure attrition.
How so?
Well, in most role-playing games, you have mechanics that act as a safety net, right? You have hit points, which essentially function as a numerical buffer.
Right, they let you make mistakes.
Yeah, exactly. You get hit by a sword, you lose some points, but you keep fighting. The Tomb of Horrors deliberately invalidates those statistics. The traps here bypass the character sheet to target the player's actual intellect.
Right, the human brain at the table.
Yeah. We see the heavy use of what the community calls save or die mechanics.
And for anyone not deeply steeped in the hobby, a saving throw is typically a game mechanic where you roll a die, right? It represents your character's last-second reflex to dodge a fireball or resist a poison.
Normally, yes.
But here, the sources detail traps that offer no saving throw at all. You just die.
The entrance alone sets the tone. You walk up to this hill, and there are 3 tunnels. 2 of them are false entrances.
Okay.
If you walk down them, the ceiling collapses and permanently entombs your character. There is no roll to dodge the falling rocks.
Wait, really? Just instantly?
Instantly. Right out of the gate, there's a 2/3 chance of an immediate game over if you aren't exhaustively cautious.
Like, is brutal.
And if you do make it inside, you find areas like the Chapel of Evil. It's designed to look exactly like a religious sanctuary, complete with altars, and pews.
But I'm guessing it's not a safe space.
Definitely not. If you interact with him the way a normal player exploring a fantasy world would, you are just struck by lightning or killed by lethal gas.
There is also this profound weaponization of sensory subversion that I read about, like the cavern of gold and silver mists.
Oh, that one is notoriously mean.
It's described as visually stunning, right? Filled with these sparkling, swirling vapors. Naturally, a player sees that and thinks, ah, magic, let's explore.
Of course they do.
But stepping into those mists permanently inflicts mechanical damage to the character's intelligence.
Yeah.
It literally turns the character into an idiot with zero saving throw allowed.
None at all.
It teaches you a brutal psychological lesson. In this environment, beauty and curiosity equate to extreme, undeniable danger.
The environment completely conditions the human sitting at the table to stop trusting their instincts. But the module does throw the players one singular lifeline.
The introductory riddle.
Yes. Players can uncover a cryptic poem early on.
Yeah.
And without that riddle, navigating the tomb is just a series of unfair, lethal coin tosses.
It's just random death without it.
Exactly. But armed with that poem, the Tomb of Horrors transforms. It becomes an intricate, solvable cipher. Because the challenges rely on player knowledge rather than randomized dice rolls, once you learn the secrets, the mystery is solved.
So it operates as a one-and-done rite of passage.
Right. You beat it once, you know the trick.
I do have to push back on this design, though. Looking at the sheer unfairness of these encounters, is this even playing a game anymore? Or is it just hazardous archaeological bomb defusal?
That's a very fair question.
Because in a normal game, you're acting out a character, making heroic swings, experiencing a story. But here, if you have to literally say out loud that you're using a 10-foot pole to tap every single paving stone before you step on it.
Which you have to do.
Right. Or if you have to summon a herd of animals to walk blindly ahead of you just to trigger invisible traps. It sounds less like a thrilling adventure and more like a grueling, paranoid chore.
It definitely can feel like that.
Which makes me wonder about the motive. If you are designing something this punishing, what is the actual goal?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture of gaming history, we find a deeply pedagogical motive.
Pedagogical, like teaching a lesson.
Exactly. The popular mythology surrounding the creator, Gary Gygax, paints him during this era as a purely sadistic killer DM.
Yeah, I've heard those stories.
Right, there are these legendary stories of him gleefully tearing up the character sheets of players whose avatars perished in the tomb. But the reality is that he was trying to teach his audience a lesson.
He was actively trying to humble them.
By 1975, the game had been out for a little while, and Gygax was seeing players with high-level characters who felt completely invincible.
They thought they couldn't lose.
Right. They were treating role-playing like a tactical war game, assuming their superior stats and magical swords guaranteed victory. So Gygax wrote this module as a definitive counter-argument to that power gaming mentality.
It was a wake-up call.
He explicitly stated in his notes that, quote, grain work is good for all players. He wanted to prove that no amount of mechanical superiority could save a player who lacked caution and critical thinking.
So the theatrical tearing up of character sheets was a harsh corrective. It was meant to underscore that your actions have permanent consequences.
Exactly.
I would love to know how players actually reacted to that at the table back in the 1970s. Because our sources mention he play-tested this meat grinder on his own friends and family first.
Oh, the play-testing anecdotes beautifully illustrate the divide in how humans solve problems.
Yeah.
On one hand, you had Ernie Gygax playing his famous wizard character, Tensor.
And how did he do?
Ernie took the traditional heroic route. He painstakingly navigated the traps, battled the demilich at the end, and actually won.
Wow. Good for him.
But then you have Rob Kuntz playing an evil warlord named Lord Robelar. Rob understood exactly how Gygax's adversarial mind worked, and he brought a completely cynical, pragmatic strategy to the table.
The 14 orcs.
Yes. He marched a cadre of 14 low-level orc henchmen into the tomb.
That is so grim.
Instead of risking his own powerful character, he used them as literal cannon fodder. He forced the orcs to walk ahead, systematically sacrificing his entire retinue to trigger all the instant death traps and clear the path.
So he just walked over their bodies.
Pretty much. He navigated the tomb, looted the treasure, and escaped without ever even entering the final room to fight the boss.
It's completely ruthless, but it perfectly bypasses the intended heroic struggle. But you know, what really surprised me in the research is that Gygax wasn't the sole architect of all this misery.
Oh, right. Alan Lucien. He is a fascinating figure in this story.
Who was he?
He was an original playtester who was often completely overlooked by history. Before the Tomb of Horrors was finalized, Lucien submitted a handwritten 4-page adventure to Gygax called The Tomb of Rahotep.
Oh, so an Egyptian-themed dungeon.
Exactly, featuring a lich. Gygax borrowed heavily from Lucien's mechanics to build his own masterpiece of suffering.
What kind of mechanics did Lucien invent?
Lucien was a master of psychological tricks. He invented the concept of the false burial chamber.
Oh, I read about that. That is so mean.
Think about the psychology of it. You put exhausted, paranoid players through a meat grinder, and then they find a room with a coffin and some moderate treasure.
They just want to be done.
Exactly. The players are so battered they want to believe they've won. They grab the fake loot and leave, completely missing the real hidden tomb. It pacifies their greed.
That is brilliant.
Lucien also invented the plaster-covered secret doors, which forced players to verbally state they were chipping away at the walls rather than just rolling a die to search for a hidden lever.
And didn't he invent the black hole trap, too?
The sphere of annihilation, yes. It's essentially a localized, magical singularity that deletes anything it touches from existence.
Scary stuff.
Lucien originally designed it to be controlled by a magical jackal stick. Gygax adapted that concept into the static, mouth-like traps we see in the final module.
Did Lucien get credit for all this?
Well, Gygax did initially credit Lucien in early printings, but that dedication curiously vanished in later editions,
Wow, just erased.
leaving modern RPG historians to painstakingly piece together Lucien's legacy from archival manuscripts.
Okay, so I can understand playtesting this sadistic bomb defusal simulator with your friends in your basement, right? You know them, you know what they can handle.
Right, it's a closed environment.
But it is quite another to unleash it on the public. How do you objectively enforce such agonizing, unfair rules on total strangers without causing a literal riot at the table?
It's a huge logistical problem.
It seems like it would just devolve into arguments over what the human player meant to do versus what the dungeon master heard them say.
That operational problem required a massive innovation. We have to set the scene at the Origins I convention in Baltimore, 1975.
Okay, setting the scene.
This is before the module was a commercial product. Gygax deployed the tomb as a brutal tournament thought experiment. Imagine the sheer chaos of this. They had 8 groups, each with 15 players, running simultaneously with pre-generated characters.
15 players in one group?
Yes, and they had a strict 2-hour time limit.
15 people yelling over each other, trying to coordinate tapping every inch of a floor with a pole, all while a clock is ticking down from 2 hours. That sounds impossible to adjudicate.
It was practically impossible to clear the dungeon under those conditions. The scoring system reflected that reality too. It wasn't about defeating Acererak or being a hero.
What was it about?
Pure capitalist extraction. Success was measured solely by the total monetary value of the loot a group managed to carry out before dying or fleeing.
Unbelievable.
The tournament winner, a player named Gary Gygax, simply survived long enough to extract the most cash.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Because you had multiple different dungeon masters running this nightmare for massive groups of strangers, Gygax needed a way to ensure total objective consistency.
He couldn't have players arguing with the referees.
Right. He couldn't have players screaming that one DM described a room poorly, leading to their death, while another DM gave better clues. So he commissioned a 14-year-old artist named Tracy Lesh to draw visual panels representing the specific traps and rooms.
This was a massive epistemological shift for the hobby. It fundamentally changed how information was delivered.
How so?
Well, when TSR officially published the module in 1978, those initial panels were professionally redrawn by artists Dave Trampier and David C. Sutherland III.
Right.
It was released as a highly unusual split booklet. The text and rules in one booklet and 32 distinct illustrations in another, wrapped in a monochrome pinkish-red cover.
And it evolved from there, right?
Yeah. Later in 1981, it received the iconic green cover with Jeff Dee's art and eventually evolved into the complex isometric maps by Mike Schley that are used in digital formats today.
I want you listening to put yourself in that chair and think about the psychology of that illustration booklet. Handing a player a piece of art shifts the entire burden of perception.
It really does.
Instead of relying on a verbal description where a misunderstanding is just a conversation away, you were handed a piece of objective visual truth. The art showed charred remains on the floor, spiked pits, hidden keyholes.
It's all right there in front of you.
Exactly. If you failed to notice the exact color of a mosaic tile in that drawing and your character died, You couldn't argue with the person running the game. It was your fault. You missed the detail.
You couldn't blame the DM.
It feels less like a story aid and more like a high-stakes legal contract disguised as a picture book. You are forensically scrutinizing the fine print so you don't instantly die.
The text for the Dungeon Master actually enforces that legalistic rigidity too. It explicitly warns them not to give helpful hints or even allow their facial expressions to betray a secret.
No mercy.
None. It established a fiercely adversarial DM versus players dynamic. The game was no longer just about imagining a fantastical space, it was about analyzing a document for lethal loopholes.
Wow.
It proved there was a deep appetite for killer dungeons modules that tested a player's systemic mastery over narrative progression.
And how did players adapt to this new, unforgiving contract? Because despite how rigid the Tomb of Horrors is, the sources highlight this brilliant piece of archival trivia that proves players were learning to exploit the system right back.
Oh, you're referring to the scepter loophole.
Yes. Tell us about that.
It perfectly illustrates that Gygax, for all his uncompromising design, rewarded genuine human ingenuity when it operated within the strict logic of his world.
Okay.
The final encounter is Acererak's skull, which is practically immune to all conventional magic and physical damage. But earlier in the tomb, players can find a cursed crown and scepter.
And they are dangerous, right?
Very. The module's own rules explicitly state that if a player touches the wrong end of the scepter to the crown, the magical feedback results in instant death. Period.
So during a convention tournament, a player looks at this invincible boss, remembers the instant death trap they found an hour ago, and just places the cursed crown directly onto the demilich's skull.
Yep.
Then they tap it with the lethal end of the scepter.
They weaponize the dungeon's own gotcha mechanic against the boss.
That is amazing.
The DM running that table actually called Gygax over to adjudicate the ruling.
Yeah.
Gygax looked at the creative application of the rules and decided that, yes, the trick worked. The seemingly invincible demilich was instantly annihilated.
That proves the game really was about outsmarting the system, not just surviving it. And the shadow of this system is huge. We see its influence everywhere.
Oh, totally.
Like in the indie video game Night in the Woods, there's a hidden no-clip area, meaning a place where the player can walk through walls outside the normal bounds of the game.
Right.
And it's called Mallard's Tomb Room. It pays direct homage to the module's secretive, boundary-breaking design. We even see the legacy in the language itself. Gygax deliberately used incredibly obscure, archaic vocabulary.
He really did.
He wouldn't just say a stone on the wall was green or yellow. He described them as olive, russet, and citron.
That vocabulary forced players in the 1970s to literally consult dictionaries mid-game just to understand what they were looking at.
That's hilarious.
It further solidified that this was a test of out-of-character intellect. You weren't playing a hero, you were a human being taking an exam.
But not everyone views that exam fondly, right? We have to talk about the great green devil face controversy, because it is the trap everyone remembers.
This is Encounter Area 6. The visual booklet shows a mosaic of a leering, demonic visage with a pitch-black, gaping maw.
And that mouth functions as one of those fixed spheres of annihilation we mentioned earlier, a magical black hole.
Exactly. If anyone or anything touches that darkness, it is instantly and irrevocably destroyed.
Now, critic John Wick notoriously labeled the Tomb of Horrors the worst adventure of all times, specifically because of traps like this.
He was very vocal about it.
He claimed the design was inherently toxic because DMs were instructed to trick players into jumping into the mouth.
Right, but RPG historian Justin Alexander thoroughly debunked that claim. The text strictly forbids the DM from giving misleading hints.
So the trap is fair.
Defenders of the module point out that the green devil face is entirely fair within the paranoid context of the dungeon. It radiates intense magic, it is visually terrifying, and its true structural purpose is to serve as baby's first death trap.
Setting the stakes.
By placing it early in the module, the design clearly communicates the lethal stakes. It tells the player this world will destroy you without a second thought. It prepares them for the truly deceptive, inescapable areas deeper in.
So what does this all mean for the hobby today? Because the Tomb of Horrors has been converted into nearly every subsequent edition of Dungeons & Dragons.
It is.
And in modern systems like 5th edition, the underlying philosophy of game design has radically shifted. Characters are much more resilient now. They are built around heroic fantasy mechanics.
Yes, the safety nets are back.
When you trigger a pit trap now, your character can often just make a dexterity saving throw, a mechanical dice roll representing their agility to dive out of the way and survive.
This raises an important question that acts as a permanent Rorschach test for game designers. The player skill versus character skill dilemma.
I want to pose this direct challenge to you listening right now. If you take an adventure built entirely to test the human player's paranoia, a dungeon that explicitly bypasses the character sheet, and you convert it into a modern system where the character's stats can suddenly save them from a poor human decision, does it lose its soul?
That's the million-dollar question.
Is a version of the tomb where you can just roll a high dexterity save to survive still the Tomb of Horrors? Or is it just a nostalgic theme park ride wearing the skin of a legendary death trap?
It is the core philosophical debate of the tabletop community. Does bypassing a character's stats to test the human spatial reasoning represent the purest form of cognitive challenge and interactivity?
Or does it betray the immersive promise of a role-playing game? If you are playing a genius elven wizard, but you, the tired human holding the pencil, forget to check the ceiling for a trap should your genius character die.
The Tomb of Horrors loudly and unapologetically argued yes.
It is an absolutely uncompromising vision. To wrap up our deep dive today, whether you view the Tomb of Horrors as a masterpiece of systemic problem-solving or a toxic relic of adversarial design, it undeniably achieved its primary goal.
It certainly did.
It humbled the arrogant. It proved that no avatar, no matter how mathematically powerful or well-equipped, is invincible if the human driving them isn't paying attention.
And it leaves us with a provocative final thought to consider.
What's that?
We live in an era of auto-saving video games, GPS navigation, and highly forgiving, frictionless digital experiences. We have largely engineered genuine failure out of our modern entertainment.
We really have. Everything's so safe now.
Perhaps the enduring fascination with the Tomb of Horrors isn't really about nostalgia for 1970s tabletop gaming at all. Perhaps it speaks to a deep, unfulfilled human craving to have our actual intellect, our caution, and our resilience genuinely, unapologetically tested against a completely indifferent environment.
An environment that doesn't care about your magical armor or your heroic backstory. An environment that will absolutely obliterate you simply because you forgot to tap the wall with a 10-foot pole.